Welcome to the Business of Music. I'm Jan Hall from Folk Roots Radio.
And I'm Gary Glass from Quantum Sound Productions.
The Business of Music is a new video and audio podcast dedicated to all aspects of the music business. And we hope through interviews and discussion to help musicians work their way through a rapidly changing business environment.
And you can find us on YouTube for the video and on SoundCloud and iTunes and wherever podcasts are available. And click the notification bell, subscribe, and leave your comments. We'd love to see what you have to say and to help us expand our repertoire of what we do here.
Joining us today, we have Benjamin Dakota Rogers. I've actually known Benjamin Dakota Rogers for 5 years. He's just released his latest album, Better By Now. That's actually his fourth album since he started in his career. He's a musician that's definitely going places, and we're looking forward to chatting with him today to learn more about how he is navigating the business and also dealing with changes in the environment. The development of streaming, it's certainly turned everything upside down. So we're definitely looking forward to talking to him about how his business is developing.
Excellent. Let's bring Benjamin in.
So it's great to have you join us in the studio today.
Thanks so much.
I think this is the fourth or fifth time that we've actually had a chat about your music. The interesting thing is that Benjamin, I first met at the Folk Music Ontario conference, I think 5 years ago, as part of the Developing Artist program, which in those days was actually called the Youth Program. Now, interestingly, normally when people, come into that program, they're young performers who, already feel that they have some talent for music. Maybe they've started to explore songwriting, perhaps dip their toe in the water a little bit as far as recording is concerned. But I remember the interesting thing about you was that you arrived at Folk Music Ontario with your first EP, a fully finished album, and not only that, you were producing great music even in those days. You've gone on and you have produced songs that have won awards, the Songs of From the Heart at Folk Music Ontario. I think you won one of those in 2017, a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Yeah, so things are going pretty well. The latest album, as I mentioned, Better
By Now.
The latest album is Better By Now. Tell us a little bit about where you're at in your career these days.
We're about to go on tour in support of the record. It's finally come out. It's been done for almost a year. So it's nice to finally go out and get that going, and just working on everything that comes with releasing a record.
Now, you started out in music at a pretty young age, and I think according to the story in your bio, that was when you inherited your great-grandfather's
my great-grandfather.
violin?
His violin, yeah.
At 7-year-old, yeah. So tell us a little bit about how things started for you.
I inherited this really old, it's terrible, actually, violin. I've never actually played it. But my grandpa came down from Timmins and gave me his father's violin when his father had passed away. And it was in the house, and so I asked for lessons, and my parents got me a much smaller violin and threw me in lessons with this wonderful woman who was just down the road. And I took lessons until I was in grade 12.
So when did you decide that maybe you wanted to make music a career?
I don't know. Like in high school.
Haven't you made that decision?
No, I definitely have now. I wanted music to be a career, but it definitely didn't look like this when I was in high school. I planned on going to Humber for jazz violin, and I wanted to be like an accompanist. And so that's kind of what it looked like for me. Is that was still my main instrument at the time. That's what I was working on, and it completely changed. I put out an EP, and it was nominated for a CFMA. Then it won. A couple songs from it won at the International Songwriting Competition, and I realized how much I enjoyed singing, which is something I hadn't really done prior to that, and I'm still figuring out how to do. And it was it just kind of took off from there. And unfortunately I haven't played a ton of violin since then. I only play 1 or 2 songs a show now.
Now, you grew up on a farm outside Brantford. When we look at the way that your career has gone, you seem pretty driven. Having had the privilege of meeting your parents and your brother, I realized that you had a really supportive environment at home. Do you think that really helped you develop?
It's pretty much the main reason that I am doing this as a career and not a hobby. My dad was the one that told me not to go to Humber and to play music. He's the one that set up. I didn't know how to go about recording a record. And the way my EP actually came about was I was selling an electric violin that I'd had. And I can't even remember his name. A country artist came to pick it up for his daughter. And Dad showed him like some recordings I'd been doing. And he was like, oh, like, this is a guy you should look at locally to record. And so, like, my parents were like 110% supportive of whatever we did as kids and figure it out in those first, like, couple months and years even of playing.
So when you first started out, were you recording your own
like
material?
Terribly. Like, it was, like, on tablets and phones. Like, it wasn't like I was recording anything other than just to write songs and remember them. There was no fancy recording process or anything cool.
And that's something that's developed over time. I think with the new album, you were in a studio in Hamilton for this one?
Yeah, Catherine Northridge.
Is that the first one that was in an album or in a studio, or were the others?
The others were in a studio, but it was like a basement home studio.
Okay. So this is like the first time
it was
you actually
a proper,
made the step up.
There was a mixing board and those really pretty VU meters and
lots of flashy lights.
Lots of flashy lights and all of the cool vintage gear that I nerd out over. So it was awesome.
You even have your own mic setup, right?
I do. Yeah. My live mic setup is I have like a KSM 8, which is a Shure microphone. It sounds a lot like a ribbon. It's really smooth in the top end, so you don't get any kind of like gross spikes when I get loud, because I'm a really like
very dynamic
singer.
Yeah.
And it really tames a lot of that, and it's also just like there's very little proximity effect, so you don't get muffledness when you get in close to it. It still has the same tonality when I'm far away from it. And it's just like really warm and nice sounding. So I use that as my main vocal, and then I have 2 microphones on the same stand. And the other microphone is a Placid Audio copper phone, they're made in the States. It's like a big copper pipe, and it sounds like a transistor radio.
So when you graduated from just being someone with an instrumental idea for a career into a singer-songwriter, did it take you long to make that adjustment, or was that just because you were driven enough to play in your own time?
It was what it was it wasn't that I necessarily made the decision to do that. It was like I picked up tenor guitar and I started writing songs, and I was like, I like this, and it just kind of flip-flopped and fell into this thing that I enjoy doing more. And from there maybe drive came in, but the process of transferring over was pretty natural.
And discovering your voice, is that something that took time, or?
Yeah. I'm still totally working on that. I've been going to a vocal coach, and I had no idea how to sing properly, and I've been unlearning bad habits. And
is that to sustain your voice when you perform?
Yeah. Well, it's just I can always get through shows. That's never a problem. But it's like when you have like 5 or 6 shows back to back, I don't want to be super tired, and I'm always going to be a little tired because it's still like you're still wearing on it. But I'm trying to be much more conscious of it and make sure that there's longevity to this, because there's not a lot of point in putting all this work in.
You have a lot of energy in your vocal.
Yeah.
And in order to, that's what you are. So when you're performing, that's what, anybody who knows you wants to hear that.
Yeah.
But you've got to save yourself.
Yeah.
So you
also
don't
can't
destroy
kill myself.
your voice.
Yeah.
So over the long term.
Because I know you growing up on a hobby farm outside Brantford, and I know your publicity material plays up the gritty side of your music, and you have that sort of I don't want to say Tom Waits'ian voice, but I could, maybe in 20 years' time when we're having this conversation, we maybe will be saying a Tom Waits'ian voice. And again, that obviously means that you do need to protect
I have to be careful of it. Yeah, and I'm trying to pull as much of that out as I can with while keeping my voice sounding the same, so it doesn't hurt it.
Yeah. The songwriting is interesting because you're strictly speaking part of the folk genre, but you like to dip into other influences. There's a bit of blues in there, some country in there.
I feel like a lot of the stuff I do is very like I soak up a lot of the things around me and the different music I listen to, so it just kind of I don't know if there's a specific thing that I'm stuck to, which it may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing. But
as a songwriter, how do you go about writing songs? I mean, do you find it easy to get in the mood to do it? I mean, is it a daily thing for you? Yeah,
it's definitely a daily thing for me. I most days I'll spend a couple hours at it. I'll definitely there'll be days where I won't touch a guitar. There's days where I won't write anything. I usually have a guitar at some point. But it's a constant thing, and I make sure I set aside time for it.
So how do you document what you're working on? I mean, do you have a certain style? Are you somebody who works with an iPad or a notebook?
I have a phone, and I just press record. Yeah.
Okay.
And I have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of audio clips on my phone. The only problem with that is it means when I get new phones, I can't trade the phones in. I have to keep them because they're just a stick full of my...
like an archive.
Yeah. And then I can go back to.
That's interesting. Yeah. So does that mean that you might, if you're driving down the highway or something, you might if you start to think about something, you might want to pull over and
I have
and put something into the phone?
I have a mic hooked up in my dash so that it doesn't sound completely terrible. It just Bluetooths to my phone. So that I can record audible.
A rolling recording studio.
Yeah, just enough that I can because sometimes the phone, if there's noise in the background, I'm not going to actually hear what I'm saying or singing. So having that helps a little bit when I'm off somewhere.
So let's look at the business side of it a little bit. So as an independent musician, there's a lot of things you have to do yourself.
Yeah.
So do you do your own social media, and are you into social media?
I hate Twitter. I hate everything about Twitter. It drives me nuts. I am told to post to Twitter. I never post to Twitter. I love Instagram. I post there almost every day. I love and part of it's I love photography. I think it's a really great platform. It's a platform that a ton of young people are on. It's Instagram is full of hipsters, which is the demographic that usually likes me. So yeah, I think Instagram's a wonderful platform, and I'm really hot on it. Facebook's what it is. You have to use it. It's I find it's hit and miss for some things.
Yeah, but I think we've had discussions about Facebook, and it's kind of it's how do we put it? It doesn't really give you a realistic view sometimes of what's going on.
It doesn't.
With people.
It doesn't, and it's also the demographic on Facebook is changing a lot. Where Instagram is primarily people under 30, or I don't know exactly what the numbers are.
Which probably explains why I don't use it much.
Yeah, okay. So where a lot of my friends that are a little bit younger than me don't even have Facebook. They never had Facebook. Yeah. They just have Instagram. And so the demographic on Facebook seems to be getting older and older. My grandma's on Facebook. It's and it seems to be that, which is great if you have an older fan base. And that's how I connect with anyone that likes my music that's over 30. But yeah, everything for me, for the most part, at least, is on my Instagram.
So you do use a management? You have a manager?
I have a manager, yeah. He's wonderful.
And just in a general sense, explain what he does for you.
He makes sure my life is in order. He makes sure all my scheduling is together. He makes sure my royalties are coming in. He keeps everyone else in line. as far as like booking agents and publishers and publicists, and he handles all of. He really, what he does is he handles 99% of the business stuff.
Is he getting you your bookings? And
So my agent does that.
Oh, so you have an agent.
Who is through Chris, at least in Canada, and then we're with Strategic Touring in the States, who books the American shows. But when we're looking to book a tour, I don't necessarily talk to Mike.
Sure.
Chris talks to him and makes sure everything is schedulally going to line up. I'm assuming Chris set this up.
That's Chris Thompson at Subculture?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he, my calendar is beautifully laid out. I can open my calendar. It told me where to come today and what time I had to be here, and had the MapQuest link. And
so he organizes your life.
Yeah, he makes sure that my life, when it comes to music stuff, runs smoothly.
So how did you hook up with Chris?
He found me.
Did you actually look for a manager?
Not at all. Actually, the first time he messaged me, I was like, no, I'm good, man. I didn't think I needed one at the time. I was making a lot of money playing bars. I was playing like 2 or 3 a weekend, and I didn't know what next steps were needed to be taken to go any further. This was what,
2 to 3 years ago?
Yeah, about 2 years.
Okay.
I didn't know where to go next from that, and I also wasn't super concerned with it because I was making killer money. So it wasn't. Yeah, so he messaged and I was like, I don't really think I need a manager. And he messaged again. And then I think like 9 months after he initially contacted me, things had started to pick up more. And I was like, yeah. He messaged me again. I was like, yeah, let's like have a meeting and talk about it. He initially found me on YouTube. He saw a video that I'd posted up there. And we sat down and everything he said made a lot of sense. And we started working together.
So things have developed pretty well for you then with the management situation.
Yeah.
Is that normal that, people will, send you a message saying, hey, are you interested in a management deal? I mean, I know you talk to other people, you go to conferences, and I didn't know if anyone else had actually said, hey, Benjamin, have you thought about getting a manager?
There were some people that talked to me about it, but there was no one as like persistent as Chris. And I didn't think I needed one or didn't want one yet, and it was his persistentness that.
And I assume he kind of sold himself to you.
He did, and he did a good job of it. So, yeah.
And he takes a percentage of.
He does.
Yeah. And you've reached a point where obviously that feels like having someone that can manage your schedule and make sure that you know where you're at.
Yes,
makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, where it becomes totally worth it.
From the point of view of recording albums, you've got the 4 albums now. Wayfarer from 2014, Strongman's Address to the Circus Crowd 2015, Whiskey and Pine 2016, and then the new album, Better By Now. It probably helps having someone in your corner, to help guide you through the funding side of things.
Yeah. The reason Better By Now was made the way it was because of grants. I was really lucky. I got the JSR grant from Factor, which is also like helping me with my touring this year. And
that's the juried sound recording.
Yeah. And it gave me the money to record the record. Before I got the grant, I had an 82 Volkswagen bus that I sold to fund the record, and like I have a 1908 Gibson F2 mandolin I was thinking about selling, and I was trying to find money, and it's difficult. And even if I had sold my vintage instrument collection and my car, I still wouldn't have had the amount of money that comes from getting a grant like the JSR.
And you were prepared to sell all of that?
Yeah.
Those things to make sure that you could make a record?
Yeah.
Now, you don't do crowdfunding, is that right?
I don't, no.
Okay. Is that just you've not needed to do it, or?
No, I could definitely use crowdfunding. It would be lovely, but I have a couple of feelings. I feel uncomfortable asking people for something that doesn't exist yet. And I've always felt as though it's the artist's job to find a way to create their art and then bring it out into the world, and hopefully people like it enough to buy it. And like, not that there's anything wrong with crowdfunding, but I personally don't. I can't do it.
I guess it's between you and your art, right?
Yeah. And it's like, I feel like I have to. It's my job to create this, and maybe I will get no grants for the next like 5 years, and I'll be super broke, and I'll be like, I really want to put out a record, and I've sold everything I own, so I'll have to do crowdfunding. But the way I've always felt about it, even when I really could have used it, was that it was my job to find a way to come up with the money and work odd jobs and do whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting because, when you look back at a career, I mean, you're still, early 20s?
Yeah, 22.
22,
yeah.
Which seems very, very, very young. You see why you hang out on Instagram all the time. Yeah. But, 4 albums, I would think you must be a good bet. You're one of those people that if I was, thinking of getting behind an artist, I'd say, well, Benjamin Dakota Rogers would be somebody you would definitely think about because, you're prolific and you get the job done. I mean, which would from the point of view of crowdfunding would say, well, he's somebody that would be a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, and I think that's partly why I got the grants, is because I had 3 self-funded albums that were already out in the world, and they knew I was actually going to make one, and yeah.
Do you think of yourself as an albums artist? To me, I mean, the answer to the last question would be, yeah. I mean, I'm making art, and it's up to me to make art and then share it with the world.
Yeah.
But with the way things are changing, streaming is completely upending everything. We hear stories from, people not making as many CDs.
Yeah.
The story of some cars not having a CD player in them. And that sort of thing.
Which is
the
a real
whole conceptual art form of the album is kind of
diminishing.
to some extent it's going away.
Yeah.
Some people say, yeah, that's the way it should be, and other people say, no, absolutely not. I think the album, especially the concept album, is still alive and well. But
I think there will always be a place for physical copies, and that because like we thought records were dead, like vinyl, and it's completely come back, and like not to the point that it was, but like you can sell vinyl at a festival and people will actually buy it, and it's nice having something tactile in your hands and like holding like a put together album. But I also don't have any problem with all of the streaming that's going on. I think it's really great. And
well, it's interesting you say that. I had a wonderful conversation with a couple of artists from the UK just a few days ago, and we were talking about their album artists like you. And I'm radio DJ. I love having the album with me. I like to look through the liner notes, which you don't get if you're listening online. The other thing I don't like, and was the subject I was talking to them about, was the fact that even if I take my CD and put it into my computer, which I always do when I'm going to play on the radio, often the set list or the
gets jumbled
completely.
Yeah.
And I grew up in an age, and I think, well, Gary and I are of a similar vintage, so we both did, where, when you had your album, and, certainly if you were listening to vinyl, you would have side 1, side 2.
You knew what song was
5 or 6 tracks each side, and you were used to the way things rolled out. And we were talking about sequencing, and,
it was meant to
with
be
these people, it was the same thing.
Way.
It's like, oh, absolutely. Sequencing is hugely important, but it gets lost when you're putting songs into a computer, or you're going to iTunes, or you're just going to a streaming station and listening. Because I think if you put a whole album on Spotify, I don't even know this, you probably do. Do things tend to stream the way you laid them out in the original album?
If you listen to it conceptually, yeah. I think it forces you to, in not all cases, but I think it forces you to make sure that your songs can stand on their own, even though they fit into a record. Because, so one of the big things with this album launch is getting songs on Spotify playlists. The more plays you get, the more streams you get, the more money you generate, the more people listen to you that have never heard of you before because they're just following this playlist, the more people who never would have heard of you come out to your show in BC when you didn't think you had a following there. So, and that kind of environment, I think, forces YouTube, make sure that everything can stand on its own as a single or as something that could make it onto a playlist, because that's kind of the same thing, I think, as what a single used to somewhat be, is to garner listeners. But also make sure it fits into the context of the whole record.
I was interested what you said with the demographics earlier, that you're on Instagram, that tends to be younger people. But being a folk artist, I would have thought that your audience must be older and more of the grey-haired variety that I see around festivals and everything else. But it sounds like your experience is not that on the shows you do?
It's I'll have completely different shows. I'll play like a folky house concert and everyone has gray hair. And it's just what it is. But if like my numbers online and the people that come out to my shows that don't know me through like a folk festival or something are all younger. And I think that just comes from, I think a lot of the stuff I write comes from a somewhat poppy place. I think it's becoming more of that sometimes. Actually, it's kind of polarizing. I'm writing like super, super folky stuff and then fairly poppy stuff. And yeah, I think that my audience is probably split 50-50, if not like 60-40, leaning towards younger people.
You mentioned the fact that streaming and the way that music has been consumed these days has pushed you to think about the way that you write songs to make sure that they are fully formed and that they can exist on their own.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot recently about how important it is to grab people's attention when you're putting a song out on something like Spotify, or if it's a video going out on YouTube, such that, I use the term Spotification for music because it does seem in certain cases, I feel like music's starting to sound the same.
Yes.
Do you feel that that's changing your music at all when you start to write to make sure that, it can sit well on a streaming service?
Yes and no. I hate the idea of writing for a playlist or for Spotify and stuff, because I think it takes away some of the stuff that is art, because you're creating something to fit into like a mold, and the whole point of a lot of songwriting and art in general is like to not be in a mold. But it definitely, I think it's taken more into account in production than it is in songwriting, at least for me. Just like how quickly you get to the chorus after the first verse, how long your intro is, all of that production stuff. That has nothing to do with, for me, like the writing of the song, because I'm going to play it the way I wrote it live. But in the production, there's things that you can do and you can do that make it more radio friendly or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think you should ever write with the intention of it being, that's not true. There's totally a place for that. I don't see a lot of it in the folk community where people write for radio.
Right. So you're not. That's like the Brill Building way of working, which you would, get together and write your song, and hopefully it gets out as a single. Yeah. Do you ever see yourself becoming more of a singles artist than an album artist? Or would it depend on what you'd written? I suppose
depends on what I'm writing. Yeah, like if I'm writing a bunch of like really singly stuff, then that's what'll happen. If I'm writing a bunch of, like right now, at least where my head is at is kind of concept album place. That song I played earlier during the
session.
Yeah, the session was broken. Doesn't fit into the context of the record that's in my head right now, so that might end up just being a single that comes out. So yeah, I really don't know. It's going to depend on what I write. It's going to depend what I need to do.
Where do you hope your music goes? I mean, do you see that maybe in 10 years' time you'll be an electronic artist, playing with Ed Sheeran or something like that?
I'm not going to be. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. I
go down rabbit holes all the time with different gear. I bought an electric guitar. I'm going to start playing electric guitar live more. But I don't think I'm ever going to be an electronic artist. I don't think my voice suits it, and my writing style doesn't suit it, and just like my personality doesn't much suit it. But I have no idea where my music's actually going to go. Yeah. It depends what I'm writing and what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So you play a lot of different venues and like house concerts, bars, but you have a particular thing for the live sound.
Yes.
So you've mentioned your microphones. What else do you do for your live sound?
It's a lot of it's just like a lot of it's having the microphones. I feel like it's the responsibility of artists to
bring your equipment,
to
give yourself that sound.
So, a couple things, I guess, is my thing with live performance is there should be as little distractions as possible. I don't want you to wonder what I'm saying when I'm talking in between songs. And like SM58, it's a great microphone. You get close to it, you get a lot of proximity effect, which is that boost in the bass.
Yeah.
And it makes your voice sound muffled. Yeah. And there's so many shows I go to.
They get right on it.
Yeah,
you can't even tell what
young
they're
performers,
saying.
and they're so close to it, and like they're telling a long story, and it's that's a distraction that can be eliminated. Piezo pickups and guitars, when you drive them really hard, it can sound harsh and brittle, and it whacks you in the eardrums, and no one likes that. And it's like a distraction because it's like, ouch, they're not listening to the song anymore. They're
thinking about whether being annoyed.
Yeah, and there's a lot that a sound person can do, but there's a lot that an artist can do to make sure that there's no distraction.
Comes across.
Yeah,
as best as possible.
If you're writing these songs and you're being meticulous about the writing of the songs and you're working on harmonies and stuff, you should have the gear that makes your voice sound as full as you want it to, or as thin as you want it to, or it makes it sound the way you want to sound live. Because it's like, it's great to have great songs, but if you're not presenting them in a way that...
Live performance is so important now.
It is. Well, that's like where all our money comes from. And so it has to be good. So better microphones... And it drives me nuts. Specifically, actually, the folk community drives me nuts in that I feel like there's a severe lack of interest in that stuff from...
they're not tech junkies.
Yeah, and like that's fine. But like we should be trying to find a way to present our music as best we can, as audibly as we can, and as beautifully as we can. And it's not a deliberate thing. It's just a lot of people don't nerd out over gear in folk music as much as they do in, like you were saying, like electronic music or other things like that. So having the right microphones, making sure you have a good guitar, or at least a good pickup system, making sure that everything sounds good before you get to the sound guy.
Do you find that the sound guy or girl or
sound
person,
yes.
Do you find that they're usually pretty receptive when you say, oh, I want to use my own mic and I like to be set up a certain way?
I've never had a problem with anyone doing that. They're usually super happy with it because I'm like, this mic will sound like this. You don't need to do this. This will get the sound we want. And they do it and we're good. And again, like it's making sure that your sound is consistent at every show. It always sounds good. I tour with a PA just in case like a PA system at shows isn't going to sound great.
Probably less than optimal.
Yeah, so like I've got two of the Fishman fish sticks, or like the kind of like the Bose systems, and I got some QSC 12s and a mixer. And I think live sound is hugely important, and it needs to be addressed more by artists, and not just letting sound guys taking care of it.
What is your favorite sort of show to do?
Right now, full band, because it's a new thing for me. It's really nice having all of that driving force, and it just makes everything more lush. I've got a really great electric guitar player right now who's just like, it's lots of pads and it's beautiful, and that's fun. I also really love playing solo because, for pretty much the opposite reason, it's more raw. I can add things and subtract things, and I'm not going to mess with the band. I can slow down or speed up if it calls for that, and it's not going to mess with the musicians I'm playing with. But right now I'm really hot on the band thing just because it's a new thing and I'm really enjoying it.
And obviously that's something that comes when your career develops. I mean, unfortunately, the business decision you often have to make on the road is how many people can I afford to bring with me?
Yeah. And like how little am I willing to eat to afford a guitar player? So I always have my bass player with me because I think bass is super important. It fills in your low end. And bass and drums, like I find bass at least really keeps my timing tighter. So I have a wonderful bass player that's always with me, sings harmonies, and then after that I just like stack other people based on hierarchy of needs.
How big the payday is going to be too, eh?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's just Peter and I, unless there's.
It's economics.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
But it sounds like you're quite prepared to make the sacrifices. I mean, do you think that's key?
Yes.
For building a career is that, I am willing to make the sacrifices for my art if it gets me where I want to go.
Yeah. I still live at home, and I will for the foreseeable future. There's lots of times where my payout after I pay Chris, Peter, and bandmates is much less than any of them made, or nothing. But there's an end goal, and there's other things you can do for money.
So the end goal, I mean, you said that you don't see yourself, changing dramatically over time. Mm-hmm. I mean, down the road, what would the end goal be for you, from where you are now?
More money, bigger shows.
And being able to have a full band that's on the road.
Having a full band that's on the road with me. Owning a house would be nice someday. But no, it's having a full band and being able to pay them what they deserve and still making enough money that I can have a regular life and not have to work construction all week or not have to buy. I'm always going to buy and sell guitars, but it's the disease thing. But I will. I don't have to, is I guess what it is. It would be nice to not have to do a lot of running around and figuring out how I'm going to stay afloat.
Yeah. Well, I admire the, you're quite clearly, have a lot of tenacity, very driven, but driven in a very positive way, that it's you're always looking to see how I can change things, how I can develop. Very positive for you.
You have to. That's actually one of the interesting things we've been dealing with in the last couple of months is it's like as this record comes out, our shows, we're seeing them get a little bit bigger, we're getting more festivals, and it's time to like tighten up all like the chinks in our armor. Because everyone at the level that I want to be at has those all tightened up. So it's like tons of practicing with a metronome, making sure I'm going to a vocal coach, making sure my voice isn't going to die so it sounds good all the time. And again, like making sure I have the right gear and being ready for shows, making sure everything's tight.
So you're touring across Canada. Do you tour much further afield at the moment?
I love touring in the US. We did a really, really wonderful tour of house concerts and little shows on the East Coast of the States last year. We're doing a very similar run in, I think it's October. We're also heading across the Midwest to go over to California. And there's a considerable amount more shows on the East Coast, which is great. One of the things we do on tour is Peter and I are both like super into food, so we find all of like
when you can afford the food.
Yes. Well, no, but we eat instant noodles every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so that we can go have like the like best Philly cheesesteak when we're in Philadelphia, or like so we do a lot of that stuff, which I love about the States because there's so much great food, and the gigs are great, people are great. I've had nothing but positive experiences there.
And Europe as well, or have you?
I think we're going there in November. I've never played in Europe before, other than when I was like backpacking.
Is that a decision you make with the agent? Say, I think I'm ready to try and get over there?
It's with Chris. It's like, it would be good to go into Europe. We look at the Spotify numbers and we're like, there's people listening to my stuff in Europe, maybe enough that it's worth doing some shows over there. So we're going to talk to the people we know in Europe and see if we can find a booking agent and string some shows together.
Yeah, well, the one thing I love about Europe generally, obviously you realize with my accent, I did actually come from across the pond originally, but is that, you know, the fact that everything is so compact. But they do love North American music.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a real thing. That
I talk to musicians all the time who say, you know, I'm big in Belgium or I'm big in the Netherlands or big in Germany.
Yeah,
not just in the, you know, the English-speaking countries.
I know it's cool, and a lot of music I listened to in high school was all from over there, and it would be lovely to get over there.
Yeah. One last question, and then we're going to move on. With the US, what helped you break through there? Was that starting to go to conferences?
Yes, it was. I went to NERFA in Connecticut.
That's the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance. Yeah,
and it was. It did a ton for me. I booked a whole tour from it.
Yeah.
And it was a really profitable, really lovely tour. Conferences and Spotify are like the two things. It's like get on as many Spotify playlists as possible so as many people hear you. It's actually like ridiculous. I was looking at the numbers for every I don't know why, like my streaming's never been huge in Canada. But for like every 150 streams I have in Canada, I have like 4,000 in the States. Was what it's ending up being right now. So yes, there's places are closer together, bigger cities, higher people, human population or density.
Yeah.
And go to conferences and attack Spotify.
And do you analyze your stats yourself, or is that something that you get through having a manager?
I do the Spotify stuff for me. Chris does it for like my business, but I have the thing on my phone so I can go through it. I check it once a week or so to see how everything's doing.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's been great to chat with you today.
Thank you so much.
Now we get to do some fun stuff. And we're going to do a little thing we call Round the Table. So we ask you a question, and then we go around the table and just see what people's responses are. So the first one on our list today is most unlikely influence on your music. That if somebody was to listen to you or see you live, they go, I never would have guessed that.
Yeah, and we never did ask you about who your influences were. So if you want to just give a little bit of, briefly just say who your people you think of.
Okay.
But we'd love to hear somebody you think's, unusual.
Influence. Okay, so like my main influences are probably all of the Americana stuff that's coming out of the States in the last 20 years. Gregory Alan Isakov is wonderful. His production is insane. Nathaniel Ratcliffe, in the same kind of boat, killer stuff. He's doing the Night Sweat stuff now, which is really awesome. Jeffrey Martin, he's just like a crazy songwriter. I was really into Mumford & Sons in high school, as everyone my age was, and I still think that Marcus Mumford's great. Laura Marling from UK was probably the first folk singer that I really listened to in depth. So a lot of that stuff, and then I go through phases of horribly recorded blues from like 1910 and like that kind of that stuff, and I think that's kind of those are the strongest influences. Is just like lots of Americana stuff and lots of really old blues stuff. Even though I don't play a lot of blues, I still really like it.
So what about the most unlikely? Is there somebody, Ozzy Osbourne or somebody in there?
No, I like rap.
Which is interesting because I heard a couple of songs where there was a bit of spoken word slipping in there.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Macklemore, actually. I think he's fantastic. I really love Shane Koizen. He's a spoken word guy from Canada.
Fabulous.
He's fantastic. But yeah, I was gonna say Macklemore's probably my most out there influence that people probably aren't gonna pick up.
No, And Shinkoisen is a great choice.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because, we did talk about how your music's going to develop. And when I heard a couple of songs that you played in the session where you could hear that almost like it was almost a spoken word voice starting to slip in, and you could start to feel the rhythm. That was cool. It was cool. What's next on the list, Gary?
Well, Jan, we have favorite festival experience.
Can I have two? One, Blue Skies was amazing. I've played there twice. The second time I played there, it was just like, or was it second or first? Either way, Blue Skies is a wonderful festival. Everyone's super happy. It was like raining. It was cool. We went. A bunch of us musicians went and jumped off the bridge, and one of us got busted by the cops as we all hid under the bridge. I did not get busted. That was fine. That whole festival was really lovely. And then I played Live from the Rock was one of my first festivals I ever played, and I'm playing it again this summer, which is going to be really nice. I haven't been back there. But everything about that festival was like really lovely. I met some really cool people. It was just like a really lovely festival. Funny festival story. Playing Mariposa 2 years ago. Didn't know I was allergic to chickpeas yet, and I was supposed to go on right after Gordon Lightfoot's tweener. And while he was playing, I grabbed like falafel and throat all swelled up. My eyes were puffy and red. I was like a disgusting mess. And so I had like 15 minutes, and I took like a handful of Benadryl and went on and played my set. And I was amazed I got through it. The thing is, I didn't actually know that's what had done it. I hadn't had an allergic reaction before, and I was opening up for the Small Glories like a couple months later, and I had hummus after I had finished opening up, and I was like on my back the entire show backstage, not knowing what to do.
So you couldn't play at all?
I played.
Oh, you played.
I played,
and then
I went backstage, intermission, ate some hummus, and was out for the whole show just trying to survive backstage.
Oh, wow. Well, that just shows, because one of the best things about festivals is festival food.
Yes, yeah.
Especially at a place like Mariposa.
Yeah, which, so that was... Yeah. I have a bunch of really fun memories from festivals.
Yeah.
I love the whole summer festival thing.
The next one, musical guilty pleasure.
In what way? Like who I listen to?
Yeah, something...
or like just like in general music stuff.
Just in general, yeah.
I buy too much gear. I buy many instruments. I don't need as many guitars as I have at all. I've sold a lot of guitars. I was up to 30 last year, and I think I'm down to like 10 now, which is really good. I buy instruments just because they're there. Like if I have extra money and there's like an old fiddle there that it's like, I impulse buy instruments all the time. And gear, like I go down the deepest recording rabbit holes where I just like see what I can sell to fund some fancy tube mic or whatever, which is so that's the gear aspect, and the collecting of musical things is definitely one thing that it's bad.
And I think actually we should just mention this, because I think your second album was Strongman's Address to the Circus Crowd. And I think, did you have a friend that had were they a circus family or something that used to train people, and that's how you got into circus memorabilia?
That's not how I got into it, but they were definitely in my life when, like, I was hanging out with them a lot while I was writing that record. I got into it just because I really like old things. My parents deal in antiques, and we got these like really cool old things from the Conklin Brothers Circus. So I fell in love with the circus, and then I ended up teaching a little girl whose parents were part of this circus, kind of these circus acts, and ended up befriending them. And
I always wonder if down the road you won't end up running your own shows. I can think, it's almost like a Fred Eaglesmith thing that could develop.
Yeah, I used to work for him.
Did you? Were you work for Fred? Because he's a wonderful traveling show.
Yeah, I not with that. I used to work at his store. I sold his guitars and stuff at his store. all like 16, 17, 18, I think I was at the time.
Oh, he would be a good influence.
It was the best job I've ever had.
Yeah.
Other than like playing music, I got in. I was the only one that worked there. I swept up, tuned guitars, cranked up music. It was a record shop in the basement, and sat there all day and chatted with a bunch of cool people and played guitar. It was the best job ever.
And got paid.
Yeah. And it was across the road from a cupcake factory, like a gourmet, fancy, bougie cupcake factory.
The last one we have is the one we ask everybody: Beatles or Stones?
I don't listen to either.
No, not at all.
You don't listen to either?
Nope. I haven't gone through a phase of either. I couldn't tell you one Stones song. And the only reason I know Beatles is because I was in high school and I hung out with a bunch of drama kids.
Oh, that's interesting. That is
That's
an answer
different.
that we've not had yet.
Yeah. I haven't gone into a phase of either yet.
Yeah.
Maybe I will, maybe I won't.
Try that.
Yeah. Well, certainly as far as writing songs that are going to appeal to, to a wide audience,
Yes,
the Beatles have that down.
I think, I probably should listen to it at some point. I just never went through that phase.
Well, it's been great to have you
Thank you.
join us today. That's it for this edition of The Business of Music. You can find me online at folkrootsradio.com.
And you can find me at quantumsoundproduction.ca.
And before we get done, we always ask one last question.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the best piece of advice you could give someone starting out and hoping to make a career in music?
Write a ton of songs. Write as many songs as you can, because most of them at the start are going to be terrible. And it's just what it is. Listen to as much music as possible. Of course, I say like after saying I've never listened to it.
I've never listened to the Beatles.
Yeah, but like listen to as much as possible, and take criticism well. You have to take criticism or you're not going to get better. One thing my dad used to do for me as a kid is I would practice my show. I'd set up a PA in the barn, and I would play my 3 45-minute sets that I would play at bars, and I'd get him to come in, and he'd tell me all the things I was doing that made me look dumb. And he would be like, you shouldn't do that. No one wants you to do that. And I'd be like, okay. And you don't necessarily, you need someone to do that, and you need to be able to take that criticism really well, because it's important. And I think that, I think listening to, with a grain of salt, people's opinions, because you don't want to lose your originality, but listening to people and writing as many songs as possible, and really just like honing your craft, being good at your instrument, and
And I guess getting out there and playing as much as you can.
Playing as much as you can, and playing as much as you can, and release music. Like, everyone thinks that you need to go into a studio to record like a record, and I've heard like great records that were recorded to like 4-track cassette players, and you don't need to spend a ton of money on a record. If you have that money and you have no idea how to record something, and you have a spare $15,000 lying around, or whatever it is that's going to take to create your dream record, by all means do it. But you can create great music on a laptop with a preamp and a microphone in your bedroom. And I think it's really important to release music, but to do it intentionally, not just to, like my first record, I had no idea what I was doing. And like, I was really lucky that my parents were like, you should submit to competitions, because otherwise how is anyone going to hear your record? And I'm like, you're right. That makes sense. Write as many songs as you can and take people's advice.
And work on your career intentionally, which is...
Yes.
That's great.
Well, I guess that's it for today. So remember, you can find us on YouTube, The Business of Music. Subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and leave comments. And you can find us on SoundCloud and iTunes for the podcast.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.